Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 71 of the Playoff Push podcast. I'm your host, Jack Dobbins, and today I'm joined by a special guest, Peter Schwartz of WFAN. How's it going?
Great, Jack. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Being able to talk to someone who works in New York sports media. I've grown up a New York sports fan my whole life. Let's just lead off with that. How's your career really grown in the New York landscape?
I've been pretty fortunate 36 years of doing this that I've had a chance to do a lot of great things. And, working at WFAN was a dream of mine when I was in college, when FAN went on the air. And to start working there in 2009 was one of those dreams that came true. But I've been very, very fortunate to do a bunch of different things. But FAN has certainly been, meant a lot to my career and the opportunities that they've given me, whether it was doing updates or hosting, covering the Jets, getting to go to Super Bowls and things like that. So, for me, I'm grateful for someone who wanted to get out, set out to be in this business, to get to do what I've done is pretty cool. And obviously WFAN is right there at the top of the list.
What do you think is so different about New York as a landscape compared to LA or Miami or Chicago or any of the other ones? What do you think about New York specifically?
Fans getting to games on time. I went with a couple of friends on a road trip. We saw the Jets play the Raiders. We saw the Islanders play the Ducks and the Kings. And it was strange. It wasn't the first time I was in LA, but it was the first time I went to like multiple sporting events in the same week. And my family has been living in Florida for a long time, so I've been to games down there. I mean, do they read the tickets? I mean, the ticket says 7 o'clock, and you show up at 7 o'clock, and half the people are walking in at halftime, and a third of those people are leaving before the game is even over. So when I think about being a New Yorker and the sports teams, and it goes for every fan base in New York, just the passion for sports in New York to me is unrivaled. I will say I have a tremendous amount of respect for fans in Boston because I've been to a number of games in Boston. I think they've lost their minds there as well, and I think fans in Philadelphia share the same thing. So when I look at New York, I liken it to the fans in Philly, the fans in Boston, even in Chicago too. Everywhere else in the country, just sometimes a lot leaves a lot to be desired when you see the way that the fans treat their teams.
Shout out the Northeast, always on top.
Yeah. Let me throw Pittsburgh in there too. Those Steeler fans are crazy.
Oh, they are crazy. I go to Penn State, so I'm between Philly and Steeler
Yeah.
fans all day, and it's an experience. It sure is. So you have already had a very impactful, let's say, 2 weeks to the new year, doing what I believe to be the final sports flash in the history of WFAN. What was it like to do that?
That's a great question. I guess the best word that I can describe for that is bittersweet. I mean, it's a chapter of New York sports radio history that unfortunately has come to an end. Is the business has changed. When WFAN went on the air in 1987, they were doing updates every 15 minutes, and it became every 20 minutes, and it became top and bottom of the hour. Then it was just top of the hour, and then the reasoning for it is that people get their information at their fingertips on their phone or their other devices, whatever it is, and it's just a sign of the times. And it was sad in a way because obviously the decision affected a lot of people at the fan and at the company. So I feel for them. I mean, it affected me too because my two regular days of working at the fan were Saturday mornings and Sunday nights, and that last shift was a Sunday night shift. And when you worked the Sunday night shift on the fan, you also did the updates on the Infinity Sports Radio Network, and that came to an end that night as well because that network got sold to another company. So not only did I do the last top of the hour update on the fan, I did the last update ever on the network. And by the way, I did the first update on the network January of 2013. So that thing's cyclical. But when I was doing the fan updates that night, because we air the Westwood One broadcasts of the NFL games on Sunday night. So on Sunday nights during football season, I never got to do an update on the fan until like 1 o'clock in the morning. And then depending on how things go, you record the updates for the overnight. So I recorded the overnights for the 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. And that 5 o'clock in the morning update wound up being the last top of the hour update on the fan. And they're still doing updates on Boomer and Geo, but those are really, they're updates, but they're really more of a segment. It's not really a traditional update. So I got to do the last one that was at 5 o'clock in the morning. And when I recorded it, and it was over with, and I edited it and put it in the system, it hit me. Like I felt pride that I was the one who got a chance to do the last one, but at the same time, when I ended the update, I didn't have the time to name all of the update people that worked at the station. So I locked out of the update by saying, on behalf of every update anchor that ever worked at WFAN, I'm Peter Schwartz, and that's how I ended the update, because there's so many great iconic voices that have done updates, whether it was John Minko or Bob Husler, John Clossy, so many, Rich Ackerman, Erica Hershkowitz, so many legendary voices came across, and for me to have that last chance to do it, I didn't want to only give a few names. I wanted to make sure that I just encompassed everything. And I did mention John Minko and Bob Husler in the New York Post story when they did a story about me doing the last update. It was, but to kind of go back, long answer to a short question, it was bittersweet for sure.
I like how you mentioned the shift of sports media over the years. You've been at the network for a pretty long time, so you've seen that shift firsthand over the last, say, mainly decade and a half. What about the shift of sports media specifically do you think has been the most remarkable being in the same spot for that period?
Digital, the internet has really changed a lot. You're doing this podcast. I have a podcast as well. So there's different avenues to get into sports radio these days, or sports broadcasting. And those things were not around when I was getting into sports radio. And that goes back to 1989 when I graduated college, and even years later working at the Fan. It's just different now. The whole digital platform makes everything different, and streaming is obviously a huge part of it. It's just different, and now there's even more of a focus on as much content on the air as possible, which was one of the reasons why the updates went away, was because those 2 minutes could be content for someone's talk show. It could be 2 minutes of extra commercials, which brings revenue to the radio station or to the TV network, whatever it might be. So there's a whole slew of things that have made the business a lot different. And I think also the type of content that you hear on sports radio now is so different than when I was growing up and I was thinking about getting into sports broadcasting. I mean, growing up in New York, there were legendary names who did sports radio shows, whether it was Art Rush Jr., John Sterling, Bill Mazer, all those people, doing shows. And back then, like when you did a sports radio show, you actually talked about sports. And it's like now, a lot of times when people are doing shows, whether it's on the Fan or at ESPN or any of the other national sports radio networks, whether it's Yahoo, all these places, sometimes that sports radio content kind of shifts to guy talk, and sometimes it shifts to a lot of things going on in pop culture. And for me, like I'm an old school person. I'm 58 years old. Like if I get, whenever I get a chance to host, every now and then on the Fan, I always get a lot of compliments from older people because we appreciate you because you actually talk sports on the show, and that's kind of how I do my podcast. I got into this business to talk sports. I don't really care about politics. I don't really care about other things. And listen, I think there's a place if you want to bring up, hey, I went to the movies with my family and we saw this really great movie. I have no problem people bringing that up, but to spend 20 minutes talking about a movie when you're supposed to be talking about sports doesn't make any sense to me. And in this climate now, also everything is so politically charged. I can't stand it when people go off on tangents talking about politics, much less something that's non-sport. So that's where I think it's changed. I just think it's a different ball game now, sports radio, sports television. And the other thing too is I don't mean to sound long-winded, but obviously the gambling element has really affected everything. I mean, you can't go 2 seconds without seeing, I flipped on the football game before I came on with you, and you watch the games, you watch games during the week, hockey, basketball games, and it used to be taboo to mention the betting lines, and now you see it everywhere. So that's been a huge change in everything too, because there's been such an emphasis on gambling, which is different for people like myself who've been in the business a long time.
It's a lot of aspects to it because the gambling thing, obviously, Emmanuel Clase getting booted and Beasley and all these guys are, but it's being promoted by the league. So it's crazy stuff seeing all this gambling shifting and them still, selling it and then the players getting suspended and it's like a cycle. And then you mentioned all that stuff. I totally agree. I just like to talk sports. I like to see people's stories. And I don't really like to go much beyond that. I think that's where you need to be in the world of sports media.
Yeah, I I grew up, going to games with my dad, and you never heard the word gambling. Like just it was never something that resonated with me. And the other day on my podcast, I this one I'm not going to mention the name, but this one gambling operation kept sending me emails wanting to get like one of their analysts on my show. And I've had some gambling people on before, but I made the PR people who would book it. I would listen. I'm not talking about the lines. I mean, if they want to come on and break down the game, that's great. I'm not talking about lines on my show. And this one company just kept hammering me with emails. Jack. It was just, I finally had it. I just like, let me be the nice guy here and just like relent this one time. And I had the guy on
Oh,
the other day, and I have to tell you, it was one of the most enjoyable interviews that I've ever had on my show. Uh,
ooh.
the guy was great, and I had told him in advance I'm not a gambling guy, so I'm going to try my best to kind of ask gambling related questions, and I actually thought I did a pretty good job with it. And he couldn't have done a better job. Not just that, forget about the gambling information, but he was breaking down every NFL playoff game from this past weekend, and it was so nice. I'm like, you know what? Maybe there is something to this. Maybe there is something to indoctrinating the gambling thing into the show because it's so popular now. And sure enough, I had one of my highest viewer rates that I've had in recent times. And we did, I have a social media coordinator that does the clips for me, and she was putting out some clips. I'm like, wow, they really resonated. So like, maybe there is something behind that, but it's not something that I like to talk about on a regular basis. But you can see where it has a place now in the sports society.
It's so crazy. Like, way back in the day, obviously, with the first, in my opinion, the first big gambling thing was the Black Sox scandal. And then you get here just about 100 years later, and now it's, the exact opposite of that. It's a crazy world we live in terms of sports. It used to be so simple, but now there's so many different factors and all that fun stuff. But speaking of, crazy things, something that is not crazy is the Giants and the Jets having disappointing seasons yet again. We all knew it was coming up, right? So obviously that's the biggest thing is football in New York. Let's just talk. Can you just talk about this season so far?
Let me start with the Giants first. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. They have the fifth pick in the draft, and some years that fifth pick is very, very valuable. In some ways, this year it is. Some ways it's not. It's not a quarterback heavy draft, at least right now. It sounds like Trinidad Chambliss really wants to get that extra year, from the NCAA, so he doesn't have to get drafted by the Jets in the first round. But from a Giants perspective, I think they might be stuck there at number 5 because I don't know how
Hmm.
teams are going to want to move up. I mean, maybe a few notches, but I don't know if there's going to be that player that falls to 5 that other teams are going to want to jump up and get to 5. So I think the Giants are probably, and again, what do I know? I'm just speculating, but I would think the Giants are probably going to stay at number 5. The difference is the Jets, they have number 2. Does Chambliss come out? I don't know if Chambliss will be taken that high. I saw a mock draft that had him in the second or the third round the other day if he does wind up coming out. But the Jets are in a position there at number 2 that if then they be the smartest thing they can do is trade out of that number 2 and get some more picks. Because I think at number 2, I think they'd be able to swing a couple of deals with some teams that might want an edge rusher or an offensive lineman. The Jets are in a position where they need so much help that unless you've got the conviction to take the quarterback at number 2, I think Darren Muji, the GM, is just going to trade down and get some more picks. So that's where I think both of those teams are right now. The Giants, I think, have at least for the immediate time, have the better situation because they've got the quarterback. And heading into the offseason, I think the Giants have that upper hand a little bit. But we'll see what kind of magic Darren Muji and the Jets can pull on draft night.
I do like your idea about it being hard for the Giants to trade back. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, trade back to 9, to 10. The question is, do any teams want to make that move? I think the one player that I could see falling to 5 that I think is worth teams trading up for is Caleb Downs. I've seen him all over the place. I've seen him at 3, I've seen him at 7. And it really just depends where he falls there. But I think he's one of those guys, a safety prospect you don't usually see that I think teams could want to trade up. And I feel like 5's kind of the hot spot if he's not off the board by then. But I definitely am not a big fan of the trade back. I just don't think it logically makes sense in a lot of cases.
Yeah, especially at number 5. And again, it all comes down to what these teams' draft boards look like. If the Giants are sitting there at 5 and there's a guy that they really, really love, I think they're going to take them. But I think if that's not the case, they'll try to trade back. Again, I don't know what the market's going to be. If a team is really hot for a player, the Giants get lucky. They can turn that 5th pick into some more draft capital. I just think it's going to be easier for the Jets to make that kind of a deal at number 2, especially if the quarterback is not there.
Sounds good. That's going to do it here. Episode 71 of the Playoff Push podcast. Any final words?
I just want to thank you for having me on. It's always great talking about all the local teams here in New York and getting a chance to talk about the business that I'm in, and continued success to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. That's going to do it here. Episode 71. As always, I'm your host, Jack Dobbins, and have a great rest of your day.